What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Katie Kleber. Today's episode is going to be all about what I would do if I could start nursing school all over again. There's so many options with becoming a nurse and the different professional goals and where you could end up. So now that I am 15 years, been a nurse for 15 years, if I could go back to before nursing school, which would be almost 20 years ago, what would I change? What would I do differently? And so, those of you who are getting ready to start a nursing pathway, maybe your kid is, or someone you love, and you're like, I don't know what advice to give this person. I'm so overwhelmed with the options. Let me answer this question of, if I were to hop into a time machine and talk to 2004 version of me, what advice would I give myself? So let's start with what I did do. And I'm not throwing like shade past me or like how stupid I was for not doing X, Y, and Z, but let's, the future me could learn from this. So, what I actually did when I was in high school, I did not know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had ideas, but I was not proactive about like what are different ways that I could earn money and not hate life, right? I don't know. I think I had a romanticized view of professional life, and that the right thing would just kind of unfold in front of me, and I didn't have to put in this like active effort to find something I enjoyed doing and something that earned money, and what I could find that overlapped. I still had and I guess that was the early 2000s, where it was like college still was like a guaranteed job and that kind of thing. Like, oh, everybody goes to college. And there's, the internet, of course, was a thing and, very prevalent. But, YouTube was and Facebook were just coming out. Like, these online entrepreneurs were like in their infancy. So that was not like an active option back then. So I wish high school me would have been actively looking at different things that I could do. And I would hope I would have come to nursing. And if I did, I would have worked as a CNA in high school. I had some like high school jobs. I worked as a lifeguard and stuff, but I wish I had gotten into a hospital in some capacity. Um, whether that be, a transporter or something like that, where I'm in a hospital getting used to what it looks like to work in a hospital. What I did do was none of that in high school. My high school jobs was being a lifeguard, and which, well, a little healthcare, I guess. I don't know. And then when I started, I went for a traditional state school. I almost played basketball right out of high school in various colleges and toured different ones, and then ultimately decided I don't want to play. Let me just focus on school. I decided, yeah, being an elementary education teacher sounds great. I never shadowed an elementary education teacher. I just like guessed. Okay. So then I go to a state school, Illinois State, ISU. And I went there and did a semester. I lived on campus and hated the courses that I was taking. And also felt like I was not really ready for that. And I decided, let me pull back here. I don't want to spend, at that time, $12,000 a semester trying to figure out what I want to do. I want to take cost efficient courses while I figure out what I want to do. Because, now I actually have to figure this out. So I decided to go back to my hometown and go to a community college and take gen eds and then see what I liked and then transfer to a 4-year school from there. And nursing sounded like a good idea. I liked medical stuff and I liked teaching. Let me put those two together. Maybe I want to be a nurse. So I decided to go to the community college and take the prerequisites for nursing school. And I started to really like them. And then the next year, the women's basketball coach recruited me. So I played a season there while I did prereqs. Loved it. Did some summer school. So I got an associate's in applied science at a community college, which I really liked. I really like the fact that getting cost effective education directly from the person who has a PhD in that topic, which I was kind of thrown back when I went to the state school and I had TAs teaching me and who were not like experienced in teaching. And I had a really great experience getting my gen eds done at a community college. Anyway, I then decided to go to Iowa Wesleyan University out in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, which is now closed. But I went there because I could play basketball and do nursing at the same time. Again, sounded like a good idea. I knew it was going to be busy, but hey, I was going to do all the hard work and I could do it. I got there and I couldn't even finish a semester. It was waking up at 4:45 to make it to a 5:15 practice and practice for 2 or 3 hours, or conditioning for 2 hours before I started my 8 a.m. class, falling asleep during the day, and then having a 3-hour practice and from whatever it was, 7 to 10 p.m. Like, and then traveling and then trying to coordinate game schedules with clinicals was just, it was impractical. Like game schedules and clinicals didn't work. And when I'm not going to various games because I'm at clinicals, couldn't really do that. So I ended up quitting basketball after that first semester and then stayed there, finished my BSNs. Took me 5 years to get my bachelor's because when you transfer into a 4-year program, usually you got to do 3 years. So I transferred in and I did that. Graduated from there in 2010. I worked on a cardiac med surge floor, step down kind of thing for 2 years. Then I moved and I worked on a neuro ICU for 4 years. Then while I went back and got my master's in nursing education, I went PRN, or wait, I guess I was a PRN, but I worked like once a week back at that unit I started on. And then ever since my son was born in 2018, I have been full-time with Fresh RN as a self-employed nurse educator. So that's my like career. Let's go back to what I would do if I could start all that over again. CNA in high school, absolutely. Would have done that. Early experience, more confidence, foot in the door kind of thing. Then what I would have done instead of going that traditional BSN route, I would have gone to the community college that I actually ended up going to for those prereqs. They had really, and still do, have a phenomenal ADN nursing program. So I would have gone to that program, probably graduated, because it was, I'm 18. I don't have anything else going on in my life. Go, balls to the wall, get that done, do summer school, do everything, get that done in a couple years. And then I'm in the workforce. What would that be? 3 years earlier. So I'm paying, I don't know what tuition would have been back then at that school, but it's a community college and 2 full years. Maybe it might have taken me 2.5, maybe 3. I don't know. Because that's a pretty intense program. To do that all in 2 years and pass the NCLEX. But let's just say, let's say 3 years. Let's say when I'm 21. So I'm getting in the workforce 2 years earlier. And back then, when I started as a nurse, I was making $45,000 a year. So I'm making $45,000 a year 2 years earlier. So that's $90,000 more money, right? And then the ADN degree is much more cost effective than the BSN because it is the 2 years, like half the time. You're at a community college. So I wish I had done the math ahead of time, but I spent whatever it was on my BSN, and I went to went all those steps, right? I went to 3 different schools. I went to the private. Now, I did have a basketball scholarship, but it wasn't a full scholarship, and I only had that the first year. I had to pay for 2 years, and I say I had to pay for it. My parents did, and now as a parent, preparing to like help my children as they enter the professional world, oh my gosh, for them to not take loans out for me being at this private school, you know, incredible amount of saving and financial planning. And one of the reasons is my dad took out a lot of loans when he got his bachelor's, and he did not want his children, it was me and my sister, he did not want us to be paying school student loans when we were 30. So it was very important to them to have this like savings account for our school. Oh my gosh, like what a sacrifice, what a gift. So I'm very humbled and thankful for that. So I know that's not the norm. I know I got an incredible gift. But if I had done that ADN step, then I'm entering the workforce 2 years earlier. And if I'm paying for it all myself, I mean, I know my parents at that could have absolutely afforded that. But I think that's something um, that could that I could have like taken out loans and that been reasonable. Okay. So I'm getting in 90,000 earlier, right? I'm making 45K a year because at that place that I worked, in a lot of places, the ADN nurses make the same as the BSN nurses. Then what I would have done, I would have looked at my employer and said, "Hey, do you work with any BSN completion programs that you offer discounts to?" A lot of hospitals will have partnerships with various colleges and will say, "Hey, if you go here is 10% off, 5% off. We waive the application fee." There's some sort of benefit by going with one of their partners. Now, back in like early 2000s, 2010-ish, that the RN to BSN programs that are all online, or not all, but almost all, mostly online, um, they weren't most, we were just starting to do hybrid classes and things back then to provide education online. So that wasn't as fully implemented back then, but still, like, I'm 20. Like, I could go to a BSN completion program in town. Um, and not only could I get a discount by going through certain schools, I could also get tuition reimbursement from that employer. I can't remember. It was like something like 3 grand or something back then. And you do have to say, yes, I will work at this hospital for a certain amount of time after I complete this degree, which I think is a reasonable thing if they're going to pay for some of your school. But then I would have probably still graduated with a BSN in 5 years or less, but would have been in the workforce 2 years earlier, and it would have been a much more cost effective degree. All right, guys, I had to pause and just run those scenarios through ChatGPT because I really wanted to see what is the actual cost. So of those two pathways, because what we look at often is how much tuition is, but then we don't also factor in lost income. So if you have a degree that enables you to enter the workforce earlier and therefore earn money, as opposed to I'm just solely paying out money, it it really makes a big difference. And if I had gone to the ADN route, I would have lived at home. And as much as an 18-year-old really, really doesn't love to do that, if I were to lay out the two costs, like comparisons, as frustrating as it would have been to live at home, the amount that I would have saved and the debt I would not have had to take on, it's astronomical. So back then, let me just show you, or I guess walk through it. The ADN program then was about 6,500 per year. So I probably would have spent around 13 to 15K on that program, ADN wise, back then, just on tuition. But I would have stayed at home and focused solely on getting that degree done. And then I would have made $45,000 working right away. Then RN to BSN Bridge programs from the 2008 period, tuition rates vary. It looks like, I don't know if this is accurate, but for all intents and purposes, let's say I did it says $650 credit hour, assuming a 38 credit program would be 19,000. I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate. That feels too high for me, but let's just go with it. Maybe that is accurate. That actually probably is when I think about it. But let's say my employer waives the application fee because I'm going with this specific school, a 10% tuition discount and tuition reimbursement. That would bring the cost of the degree down to 13,000. Okay. So out of pocket cost of that ADN, 13,000. BSN also 13,000. So roughly $26,000. Okay. But keep in mind, I'm working as a nurse, 45K a year. and if I'm living at home at that point. The opportunity cost, is actually zero because I can cover the cost of those degrees with part of that income while I'm still living at home, being supported by my lovely parents. And they probably, this ultimately ends up being more cost effective for them too, because they really wanted to cover the degree. That makes more sense. And let's be real. My mom would have loved me to stay home a couple more years. Mamas do love that. But let's say and I ran the cost of what I actually did. I factored in the state school, the year and a half at Parkland where I did have tuition covered, but I had to pay, don't let me get it twisted. My parents paid for housing. Now, I didn't do anything crazy and fancy, but that you have to have basic housing there. And then Iowa Wesleyan's tuition. Ooh, I think they underestimated it. It says 20K. I think it was higher back then. I'm not sure. But they estimated the total, when you add all that together, you factor in all the things, about $71,000. Okay. I'm also missing 3 years of working as a nurse, earning $45K a year, assuming no cost of living increase, no raise at all. $45K. Okay. 45 times 3. $135,000 that I would earn in those 3 years that I just missed out on. Not only did I not get, I was actively also paying at the same time. So when you compare the total financial impact by like lost income and tuition, ADN to RN to BSN for me in 2008-ish would have had a total financial impact of about $26,000. Going that traditional BSN route for me back then, the total financial impact is $206,000. That's because I'm paying more for the degree, 3 times as much for the degree. And then I'm losing a large amount from not being in the workforce. So the main summary is that the ADN route for me back then would have been almost $180K less expensive, even with a bridge program. Yikes. That's pretty bananas to think about the difference of that. So if you're in decision-making mode and you're like, oh, there are a lot of ways that you could go about this. Maybe the traditional BSN and being on the college campus and doing that kind of thing is really important to you, or you really want to just get the BSN out of the way. And you do have some more financial flexibility. That might make the most sense. You can get it all done at once, one and done situation, and it's not nearly as intense as an ADN program followed by an RN to BSN. That could be very reasonable, but the ADN to plus an RN to BSN bridge, phenomenal options here. And now, like back then, for RN to BSN bridge, you had to go in person, and now you don't. Those courses can be completely online because you've already done the hard work of all the clinicals and passed the NCLEX. We just need to put the cherry on top here. And now the RN to BSN bridge program game totally changed. Like you can do accelerated options. The typical length now is 12 to 16 months. It looks like if you're doing it full time, you can do part time. But those accelerated ones, you can get done with it in as fast as 9 to 10 months. Tuition ranges are pretty wide. I think the cheapest you're going to find is about $5K. But I don't know how great those, I don't know. I don't know. I would check into that. But all the way up to $30K. I mean, that's massive. Do we need to do the most expensive one, or can we find an affordable option? And especially with it being online, you can enroll in awesome schools from afar. And there's tuition residency, in-state residency can also make a big difference. So I would really check your in-state options and see what's available. So that's just a great option for people and a very affordable one. And especially if y'all are 18 years old, you don't have kids, you can share, you have roommates, you can make your cost of living very low. Like the hustle and grind at that age if you can like really hone in like your living expenses and not take on debt if you really don't need to, and just be really aggressive with that. Just speaking as someone coming up to 40s, knowing people who have debt from their early 20s from degrees they don't even use. And people who were kind of recklessly or not really putting a lot of thought into what school and how much and is there a better way. You don't want, I don't want you to be 35, 40, paying a monthly payment of $500 it to pay off this debt from a degree you took money out for when you were 19 that you don't want to do anymore. So that's kind of my purpose with this episode, is I want to prevent those kinds of like mistakes. And I remember being that age and like, oh, I think I know what I want to do. I want to go do it. And you just kind of go. And it's like, wait a minute, I need to think about all these other things. So mama nurse here, like really wanting to make sure those of you who are younger and getting into it to make those wise decisions, because those are very much in service to the future you. Okay. And I want you, when you hustle and grind when you're younger and you're really thoughtful, you're setting yourself up to be like, have so much less stress when you're older. And I am older and I don't want any more stress than I need to have. I did also work as a bedside nurse for 8 years, 8 years, I think, before I went back for my master's. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do after I got done with my BSN and really felt like I had my feet under me as a new graduate nurse. I knew a lot of people going back for their master's, some going for an NP, actually a lot going for an NP, and like, oh, I don't want to be at the bedside forever. I'm just going to get a master's, which I very much get. But with how expensive those degrees are now and how much time they take, it is a big thing to jump into when you don't have very clear direction and purpose. And I'm really glad I didn't, because like I don't know that I would have done the MSN in education, and I might have gone back and done like this MSN that was way too expensive that I could still be paying off, that I'm not really I'm really glad that I took some time to get really good at being a bedside nurse and understanding how a hospital functioned. I did charge nurse, I did precepting, I did mentoring, I did shared governance, policy committee, peer review. I did all of that kind of stuff and really, really understood the bedside very, very well, not just from a practical clinical standpoint, but from an operational standpoint. So when I did do a competency-based master's, years later, I felt very competent going through a lot of those courses because I had a lot of real life experience to complement them. So a side note to all of this, I do have a page that is kind of new to the website under one of my learning hubs. So if you hit the menu and you see learning hubs, under learning hubs is nursing degrees and programs. And I have all these blog posts to help describe different degree options, different roles, because degrees are different than roles. Okay. You get a degree and those can prepare you for different roles, but you don't pick a role and then just get education in that, if that makes sense. So I also have a workbook that will help you kind of work through different nursing schools and planning out the different schools that you could possibly go to, and have very clear direction on the major financial decisions and professional decisions ahead of you. So that's at freshrn.com/planner. I will put a link to that in the description of this episode. Everybody has a different path, and mine led me where I was, meant to go, but I don't think that means you can't learn from it and pass on those lessons. I'm glad I went this route, but like if I started the whole Fresh RN thing back in 2013, and it slowly evolved and evolved, and I'm so grateful it turned into something that was able to support me full-time income wise. But let's say I did want to run this scenario. If I did not have that pathway, or didn't make a blog or didn't do any of that, the degree pathway, now that I've learned so much about all the MSN options, DNP options, those different things, the one that I think that I would have loved the most is a CNS, a clinical nurse specialist. I think that if I had gone back and decided to do that, I think I would have really enjoyed that role. Now, one of the things I would have really needed to consider is where I was living and if I could find a role for that, because I was living in an area with a kind of smaller market. But I think that if I would have done a master's or a DNP with a CNS focus, maybe before I had kids, when I got married, when I was 23 and I had my first kid when I was 29. So if in that time I would have done that, that would have been great. Although I would have been very careful with the debt that I would have had to acquire, because yeah, like I had kids and working full time as a parent was really, really hard. I actually backed off to part time and we made things work because it was just like, it was too much to have babies and work full time as a nurse for me. And I'm going to talk about that more in another episode, but um, it's hard when you have debt feel like you have this responsibility to be in two places at once, be with your children, and then also, wait, I did all this effort and took out all this debt to achieve this goal. I feel like I have to do this. And there's a lot, it's hard to find a part-time clinical nurse specialist role, so there's a lot of considerations that really go into it. I'm so glad and thankful for the path that I went on, even though clearly, as we evaluate the financial side of it, mine was very inefficient. God bless my parents, and I will use that blessing that they gave me to set my children up for success too, which is, I think, the greatest gift we can give the generations that come after us. So, everybody, we're all going to have this imperfect journey. And I really want you to not feel this pressure to constantly make every little decision 100% correct, because then people tend to delay decision making. Mine certainly was not a straight line, and yours does not need to be either. It is worth doing your due diligence to make sure you can make smart choices and save money where you can. But at the same time, try not to obsess or fall into that trap of obsessing over every little step has to be the absolute perfect step. There's a balance between being flippant and reckless and being so frozen by perfectionism that we don't take the first step. I see a lot of aspiring nurses, even seasoned ones, get stuck in analysis paralysis and delay making big decisions because we're afraid of messing it up. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just start. Um, as I've mentioned before, I really recommend figuring out the role you want first and then working backwards to figure out what degree would be best and what's the most cost-effective way to get there. Not the sexiest way, not the most glamorous way, but what makes the most sense to get there. And if you do want to do this the glamorous way, just make sure you know you're paying a premium for that. And if that's worth it to you, great. Like if that's fine with you, wonderful. I just want to make sure that you're considering all of your options. Um, you can focus on small, manageable steps to go from where you are now to being enrolled in a quality program. And I also don't want you to think that you have to fall into this trap of getting into a dream nursing school, whether that's for an undergraduate or a graduate degree, or land the perfect job, or it's not at all worth it. It's not true. There's plenty of excellent, affordable programs that can help you reach your goals, and often with a lot less stress and debt. Now, there are wonderful, prestigious schools that do great work. And I'm very grateful that they exist, but they're not always feasible for a lot of us to attend, simply because of the price range. You have to pay a lot to have these prestigious programs, but there's still great affordable options. And I've said this before, I've never had a patient ask me how many times I took the NCLEX. And honestly, when I reflect, I don't think I ever had a patient ask me where I went to school. um, that might be a source of pride for some people, and that's great, to be able to share. Yeah, I graduated from this amazing program. Wonderful. But being able to say that in a moment, like, if you got a great education at a more affordable place, more power to you, man. Like, that's wonderful. So if you want some help figuring out options, mapping out things, I do have that new free workbook that you can get over at freshRN.com/planner. Also link in the description. Helps you kind of work through the nursing degree options, practical tips for choosing the right ones. And when you sign up for it, I will send you a series of emails to walk through different options and even some financial tips too. I will put a link to it again in the description of the video, or I'm sorry, the podcast episode. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Looking forward to more and more episodes of the Fresh RN podcast. So thanks, nurses, and stay fresh.